blurry, chop, chop, chop. You smooth it out and make it look, maybe you can make 15 look like 24, but 24 is still bad. So the point is, you can get away with it. And when I slow down 30 FPS by half, I'll add in some other glitch things so you don't know that it looks like shit. I'll kind of smudge the chops a little bit. But now if you do the same thing to 60 FPS, what happens? If you cut 60 FPS in half, 60 divided by 2 is 30. And 30 looks fine. We all agreed that it's okay for video. So now you have smooth, nice looking slow motion at half the speed. You can even go down even more. If you want to add some hacks to it, you can slow down 60 FPS even more and then add that motion blur to it, add those effects and stuff. And now you've got super slow motion when your original is 60. And it all depends on how fast things are moving, right? If something moves across the screen really fast, those of you guys that have used Twixtor for video editing, what you got to do is take your shots really carefully, because if you're panning around, like you're fucking playing CS:GO and you're you're looking around the corner, then you're looking at your back and you're just like panning all around. Yeah. 60 FPS is still going to be really hard to slow down because the movement is going so fast. You're not going to be able to get it really low. But if you're in WoW, and let's say that you're just taking some epic cinematic footage and you take your UI away and everything off, and you're just panning across the shrine as people are walking around, you're just using that cinema pan at 60 FPS, you can slow that down a shit ton because there's not a whole lot of movement. It's just people jumping around, and that cinematic shot, you're going to be able to slow it down to 10% of the original movement and get away with it without it looking like complete shit. So there you go, guys. That's a reason why high FPS is going to make your YouTube videos look a lot better. It's in post because you can actually slow down. You can time. You have more flexibility and versatility when editing for slow-mo.
So Hot Gem asked a question about how much more RAM you'd need to do 60 FPS rather than 30. And I'd mentioned, I was like, RAM isn't really the issue when it comes to actually recording at a higher FPS. It's if you can already handle playing the game and all the panning and recording at 30, it's not going to make a difference whether you record at 60. 60 is going to take a little more space, in terms of how much memory you need for storage, but you don't need much more RAM. Now, when you go to editing, you'll need more RAM because it's going to render higher, but outside that, RAM isn't an issue.
Yeah. So any more questions? You guys have any specific questions? I think that RAM is definitely can be an issue if you don't have enough RAM, okay? Because if you don't have enough RAM, then everything's going to start breaking. But I think Tristan is right that RAM directly is probably not so much the issue as long as you have enough extra RAM that Windows doesn't freak out. Windows will take a shit if you fill up the RAM all the way. Even if you have 32 gigs or 64 gigabytes of RAM in your Windows machine, when it gets to the top, Windows will start taking a big dump and start freezing up. So always have a little extra RAM.
And that's where you're also going to notice your frames per second dip every time you try to pan in a game, especially if you do it really fast. So if you're turning and you already have low FPS, and then you turn really fast, it's going to stutter. But if you're already running somewhere 60 or above and you pan, your frames per second will drop. You may not see it or notice it, but it's going to dip down to 30 or lower. And then when you come back, because it has to reload all that imagery. So the higher the better still when it comes to gaming.
Right.
As I always say.
Right. That's a really good point. I'm going to write this down as a question right here. How to get higher FPS. And I'm going to put memory in there. Because you're right, Tristan, that every frame that passes through your screen has to go through your memory. Okay, now I'm not like the computer architect. All right, I don't know how a lot of that shit works. Where when you load an image, how it gets to the graphics card, goes through your memory to your graphics card and gets processed by your GPU and some of it by your CPU. That's some black magic that I don't understand. That I would like you guys to teach me more about, so that I could explain it more fluently. But I think that's some nerd stuff that's for the computer scientists and the theorists to understand. Basically, we don't care about that stuff. We just want it to work, and we want those frames to get higher. So how do we get higher FPS, and what is the most important component that gives you that And I'm probably going to put them, I think, in the order that I think they should go.
You also need to put that your graphics card is one, but that the memory of your graphics card is another. Not just
Okay, but
RAM.
that's under the graphics card for sure. That's the graphics. What would you call the GPU?
It's called GRAM.
The GPU in your graphics card, and the GRAM.
Yeah.
So the more RAM you have, the more images you're going to be able to pump through there. Oh, GRAM. And the GPU model you have, the newer GPUs are faster. They can do more processing, right? They can do more multi-threaded processing on your graphics, and they're going to give you more speed. Your CPU is going to be really important too, because if your CPU is too slow, it's not going to be able to process all of that data, even if you have a nice graphics card. So your CPU is still really super important.
It also depends on how much stuff you're running at once as well. Because even if
Sure,
you have
yeah.
a badass CPU and you're running a ton of shit, like you're rendering, playing games, recording all at the same time, your CPU is going to take a shit eventually. So it's more of you need to monitor your own resources as well as having enough to support what you're doing.
Yep. Just wanted to make a couple of more points here if you guys can think of something. Your disk speed. This is going to be important for capture. Important for video capture, but not necessarily gaming. Right? You can have like a slow, energy efficient hard drive and still be able to game. Maybe your games don't load as fast, but you don't need an SSD to game, is what I'm trying to say. For some types of capture, you actually do need an SSD. In fact, not for all captures. Most hard drives are fast enough for standard game capture. But as you start getting up to 60 FPS and 90 FPS, if you want to capture at those high rates with high quality video, you're going to need a fast disk. And you're going to need an SSD for game capture, for really fast FPS game capture, and also for high resolution game capture. So when we go up to 4K resolution, Swifty was doing some tests capturing to 4K, and he actually had to use a memory disk. So I was actually on the phone with him. We were trying to figure it out. He tried Bandicam, he tried Fraps, he tried DxTory. He just wanted to capture 4K gameplay so he could be the first gamer to put 4K gameplay up on YouTube when YouTube started supporting 4K resolution. And he was having a hard time. Even with his supercomputer and rated SSDs, he still wasn't making the required disk write speed to his SSDs. And he only was able to do it when he used a memory disk. And memory is much faster than SSD, but we don't have very much memory available. So, you can make a memory disk and start writing files to your memory, but you're going to run out of space really fast. But he was able to do it. And that's how he did it.
Unfortunately, granted, they start accepting 4K, but the amount of processing power, like he just said, is just astronomical. It's just not viable to be doing right now. On top of the fact that when people open it up, it takes a shit on their connection speed to try and download the video to see it. So I remember when you were posting yours, you're like, I'm sorry if your computer just blows up when you try to watch this.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
All right, cool. So what do you guys feel about that? I think that wraps that up. We all know. Okay, let me open up. Let me see if I can get. Okay. So here's Bandicam. I upgraded to the 2.0 version, so it looks a little bit different. If you want to set your Bandicam for high frame rate, you can do that in the settings. So whatever capture utility you use, there's the FPS. That's what it looks like. Here I was just doing some Battlefield tests with Motion JPEG as my codec. This is actually a really good codec in Bandicam. It makes larger files than MPEG-1, But I noticed MPEG 1 was skipping some frames. Yeah, I got a little bit of frame skippage, even with Bandicam 2. So I'm going to try what happens when I get a new NVIDIA card, graphics card. I'm going to see if that changes at all. But Motion JPEG looks really good for editing. It's very fast to edit. It's fast to edit, unlike some of the H.264 codecs. So here's the FPS setting right here. I set it to 60. Quality 80 or 90 is pretty good. 90 will be better if you're looking for higher quality. But if you just want to get some gameplay in there, 80 quality actually looks pretty good right here. And I usually use raw audio. Some wonky things happen when I change the audio codecs, so I get raw. Especially like for my microphone, I want to capture raw. So that's how you do it there. And then when you open up After Effects, let me get After Effects up. Oh yeah, Volchan. Yeah, I discovered that. We talked about the MP4. It is out of the question in After Effects now. You have to use the media encoder.
Earlier?
Well, not if you're using After Effects CC, but if you're using CC 2014, the developers took it out completely, and it's an outrage. Everybody's just going nuts on the forums about this.
Well, mine, I'm still running. I'm running CS6, and I've got it rendered.
Oh, you're
out.
fine. Yeah, CS6 it still works, and it also works in CC. You just have to check the box. But CC 2014, it's out completely. You have to use media encoder, and everyone's so pissed. So if you go here in After Effects, go ahead.
I was just saying, he mentioned that he's like, if you do render, you can go to AVI and then just handbrake it in before. And it pumps out AVI as a higher quality, does it not?
Yeah, AVI is usually raw, but the files are huge. So even
to render out that, like even in CS6, I might try that.
No, it's
earlier with it.
Oh, Zim Voodoo says the school is giving you CS6. Nice. Dome Pop says, do you guys know Lizard Squad? That sounds scary. What could that be? But Volchan does like CC 2014. I would like to upgrade, but see, I've got my render farm and stuff, so it's not just upgrading one version for me. I got to make sure that all my software is compatible for when I use the render farm. So here, if you go into After Effects, and it doesn't matter which version you have, if you have CC or CS 5, 6, or 2014, the composition settings at least haven't changed. The window looks like this, where you can choose your resolution. We'll talk about resolution next, but I think most of you guys are pretty squared away on resolution. We like to make videos at 1920 by 1080. That's 1080p basically, or 1080 rather.
Yeah, there's actually a difference between P and I. That's what people don't really understand.
I'm not even going to go into P and I. Don't do anything with I. They're still making cameras with I. We'll actually talk about that. Maybe we should actually mention that. I forgot about that. See, for us as video editors, I doesn't really come into play unless you're editing video footage from video cameras that have that old I standard. And I think, Sony, and there's some cameras that still are putting I in the technology they sell to be compatible with TVs that were made back in before electricity was invented. There was I. But nowadays, everything is P, and it stands for progressive. And it doesn't even ask you here, I don't think, if you want to use PI. It's not even going to ask you if you're going to use interlaced. Yeah, so P, 1080p
it's literally what it displays
is what you want.
It displays it to your screen is all the difference between the two is.
Yeah, but there is a slight difference too between I and P in that 60i, I believe, is equivalent to 30p. So you don't want to get fooled by 60i because it's actually 60i, it's interlaced. There's an upper field and a lower field, so it's basically cut in half. You've got, in 60i, you've got 30 upper and 30 lower. Basically, you're going to be able to achieve the same amount of frames as 30 progressive. So what you really want is 60 progressive. And that's what's going to happen here when we edit. When I make a composition in After Effects like this, it says 1920 by 1080 at 60 frames per second. This would be a composition that I would use for Legends of the Arena. You can make your settings like this if you want to edit out at 60. Now, that just means that the composition is going to be 60 frames per second. You're going to have to put some 60 FPS video in there. Let me see if I've got an example of some 60 FPS video on hand here. Let me try not to click on any of my porn. All right, but if you guys see any of that, just